Monday, everybody. Jake Johnston from JakeJohnston19.com. Excuse me. Creativity with a passion, for a purpose, to entertain, to motivate, to inspire. Now on to the continuation of H.P. Lovecraft's The Whisper in Darkness, from where I was, Chapter 5. He himself, he added, had important business elsewhere and could not stop for more than a moment. As he briskly walked up the path to the house, I climbed out of the car myself, wishing to stretch my legs a little before settling down to a sedentary conversation. My feeling of nervousness and tension had risen to a maximum again, now that I was on the actual scene of the morbid beleaguering described so hauntingly in Achilles' letters, and I honestly dreaded the coming discussions which were to link me with such alien and forbidden worlds. Close contact with the utterly bizarre is often more terrifying than inspiring, and it did not cheer me to think that this very bit of dusty road was the place where those monstrous tracks and that floated green ichor had been found after moonless nights of fear and death. Idly, I noticed that none of Achilles' dogs seemed to be about. Had he sold them all as soon as the outer ones made peace with him? Try as I might, I could not have the same confidence in the depth and sincerity of that peace which appeared in Achilles' final and queerly different letter. After all, he was a man of such simplicity and with little worldly experience. Was there not, perhaps, some deep and sinister undercurrent beneath the surface of the new alliance? Led by my thoughts, my eyes turned downward to the powdery road surface which had held such hideous testimonies. The last few days had been dry, and tracks of all sorts cluttered the rutted, irregular highway despite the unfrequented nature of the district. With a vague curiosity, I began to... Hold on a moment. One moment. Must get this going again. I have to put my background music back on. Excuse me for that. Nonetheless, a vague curiosity, I began to trace the outline of some of the heterogeneous impressions. The last few days had been dry, and tracks of all sorts cluttered the rutted and irregular highway despite the unfrequented nature of the district. With a vague curiosity, I began to trace the outline of some of the heterogeneous impressions, trying meanwhile to curb the flights of macabre fancy which the place and its memories suggested. There was something menacing and uncomfortable in the funereal stillness in the muffled, subtle trickle of distant brooks, and the crowding green peaks and black wooded precipices that choked the narrow horizon. And then an image shot into my consciousness which made those vague menaces and flights of fancy seem mild and insignificant indeed. I have said that I was scanning the miscellaneous prints in the road with a kind of idle curiosity, but all at once the curiosity was shockingly muffled and snuffed out by a sudden and paralyzing gust of active terror. Excuse me, though, for the dust tracks were in general confused and overlapping and unlikely to arrest any casual gaze. My restless vision had caught certain details near the spot where the path to the house joined the highway, and had recognized beyond doubt or hope the frightful significance of those details. It was not for nothing, alas, that I had pored for hours over the Kodak views of the outer one's claw prints which Healy had sent. Too well did I know the marks of those loathsome nippers, and that hint of ambiguous direction which stamped the horrors as no creatures of this planet. No chance had been left for me. This merciful mistake, here indeed, in objective form before my own eyes, and surely made not many hours ago, or at least 3 marks which stood out blasphemously among the surprising plethora of blurred footprints leading to and from the Arkley farmhouse. They were the hellish tracks of the living fungi from Yuggoth, I pulled myself together in time to stifle a scream. After all, what more was there than I might have expected, assuming that I had really believed Achilles' letters? He had spoken of making peace with the things. Why then was it strange that some of them had visited his house? But the terror was stronger than the reassurance. Could any man be expected to look unmoved for the first time upon the claw marks of animate beings from outer depths of space? Just then I saw noise emerge from the door and approached with a brisk step. I must, I reflected, keep command of myself, and the chances were this genial friend knew nothing of Achilles' profoundest and most stupendous probings into the forbidden. Achilles, noise, hastened to inform me, was glad and ready to see me, although his sudden attack of asthma would prevent him from being a very competent host for a day or two. These spells hit him hard when they came, and were always accompanied by a debilitating fever and general weakness. He never was good for much while they lasted, had to talk in a whisper, and was very clumsy and feeble in getting about. His feet and ankles swelled too, so that he had to bandage them like a gouty old beef-eater. Today he was in rather bad shape. Haven't ate beef in more than a month almost, so that I would have to attend very largely to my own needs. But he was nonetheless eager for conversation. Only shrimp and non-GMO grass-fed beef. I would find him in the study at the left of the front hall, the room where the blinds were shut. He had to keep the sunlight out when he was ill, for his eyes were very sensitive. As Noise bade me adieu and rode off northward in his car, I began to walk slowly toward the house. The door had been left ajar for me but before approaching and entering, I cast a searching glance around the whole place, trying to decide what had struck me so intangibly queer about it. The barns and sheds looked trimly prosaic enough, and I noticed Achilles' battered Ford and its capacious, unguarded shelter. Then the secret of the queerness reached me. It was a total silence. Ordinarily, a farm is at least moderately murmurous from its various kinds of livestock, but here all signs of life were missing. What of the hens and the hogs? The cows, of which Achilles had said he possessed several, might conceivably be out to pasture, and the dogs might possibly have been sold, but the absence of any trace of cackling or grunting was very, truly singular. I did not pause long on the path, but resolutely entered the open house door and closed it behind me. It had cost me a distinct psychological effort to do so, and now that I was shut inside I had a momentary longing for precipitate retreat. Excuse me, not that the place was in the least sinister in visual suggestion. On the contrary, I thought the graceful late colonial hallway very tasteful and wholesome, and admired the evident breeding of the man who had furnished it. What made me wish to flee was something very attenuated and indefinable. Perhaps it was a certain odd odor which I thought I noticed, though I well knew how common musty odors are in even the best of ancient farmhouses. Oh, sorry, I was on chapter 6. Now I'm on to chapter 7. H.P. Lovecraft's The Whisperer in Darkness. Refusing to let these cloudy qualms overmaster me, I recalled Noise instructions and pushed open the six-paneled, brass-latched white door on my left. The room beyond was darkened, as I had known before, and as I entered it, I noticed that the queer odor was strong here, and it was stronger than it was before. There likewise appeared to be some faint, half-imaginary rhythm or vibration in the air. For a moment the closed blinds allowed me to see very little, but then a kind of apologetic hacking or whispering sound drew my attention to a great easy chair in the farther, darker corner of the room. Within the shadowy depths I saw the white blur of a man's face and hands, and in a moment I had crossed to greet the figure who had tried to speak. Dim though the light was, I perceived that this was indeed my host. I had studied the Kodak picture repeatedly, and there could be no mistake about this firm, weather-beaten face with the cropped, grizzled beard, but as I looked again my recognition was mixed with sadness and anxiety, for certainly this face was that of a very sick man. I felt that there must be something more than asthma behind that stained, rigid, immobile expression, an unwinking glassy stare, and realized how terribly the strain of his frightful experiences must have told on him. Was it not enough to break any human being, even a younger man, and his intrepid delver into the forbidden? The strange and sudden relief, I feared, had come too late to save him from something like a general breakdown. There was a touch of the pitiful in the limp, lifeless way his lean hands rested in his lap. He had on a loose dressing gown, and was swathed around the head and high around the neck with a vivid, yellow scarf or hood. And then I saw that he was trying to talk, in the same hacking whisper with which he had greeted me. It was a hard whisper to catch at first, since the gray mustache concealed all movements of the lips, and something in his timbre disturbed me greatly, but by concentrating my attention I could soon make out his purpose. Just surprisingly well. The accent was by no means a rustic one, and the language was even more polished than correspondence had led me to expect. Mr. Wilmot, I presume? You must pardon my not rising. I am quite ill, as Mr. Noyes must have told you, but I could not resist having you come just the same. You know what I wrote in my last letter. There is much to tell you tomorrow when I shall feel better. I can't say how glad I am to see you in person after all our many letters. You have the file with you, of course, and the Kodak prints and record? Noyes put your valise in the hall. I suppose you saw it. For tonight, I fear you'll have to wait on yourself to a great extent. Your room is upstairs, the one over this, and you'll see the bathroom door open at the head of the staircase. There's a meal spread for you in the dining room, right through this door at your right, which you can take whenever you feel like it. It'll be... I'll be a better host tomorrow, sorry about that, but just now, weakness leaves me helpless. Make yourself at home. You might take out the letters and pictures and record and put them on the table here before you go upstairs with your bag. It is here that we shall discuss them, and you can see my phonograph on that corner stand. No thanks, there's nothing you can do for me. I know these bells of old. Just come back for a little quiet visiting before night, and then go to bed when you please. I'll rest right here, perhaps sleep here all night as I often do. In the morning I'll be far better able to go into the things we must go into. You realize, of course, the utterly stupendous nature of the matter before us, to us, as to only a few men of this earth. There will be opened up gulfs of time and space and knowledge beyond anything within the conception of human science and philosophy. Do you know that Einstein is wrong, and that certain objects and forces can move with a velocity greater than that of light? With proper, aid, I expected to go backward and forward in time, and actually see and feel the earth of remote past and future epochs. You can't imagine the degree to which those beings have carried science. There is nothing they can't do with the mind and body of living organisms. I expect to visit other planets, and even other stars and galaxies. The first trip will be to Yuggoth, the nearest world fully peopled by the beings. It is a strange dark orbit, the very rim of our solar system, and unknown to earthly astronomers, as yet, but I must have written you about this at the proper time. You know, the beings there will be direct though currents toward us and cause it to be discovered, or perhaps let one of their human allies give the scientists a hint. There are mighty cities on Yakoth, great tiers of terrace towers built of black stone like the specimen I tried to send you. That came from Yakoth. The sun shines there no brighter than a star, but the beings need no light. They have other, subtler senses, and put no windows in their great houses and temples. Light even hurts and hampers and confuses them, for it does not exist at all in the black cosmos outside time and space where they came from originally. To visit Yuggoth would drive any weak man mad, yet I am going there. The black rivers of pitch that flow under those mysterious Cyclopean bridges, things built by some elder race extinct and forgotten before the beings came to Yuggoth from the ultimate voids, ought to be enough to make any man a Dante or a Poe if he can keep staying long enough to tell what he has seen. But remember, that dark world of fungal gardens and windowless cities isn't really terrible. It is only to us that it would seem so. Probably this would seem just as terrible to the beings when they first explored it in the primal age. You know, they were long before here the fabulous epoch of Cthulhu was over, and remember all about sunken Raleigh when it was above the waters. They've been inside the earth too. There are openings which human beings know nothing of, some of them in these very Vermont hills, and great worlds of unknown life down there. Blue, Litten, Kanai, Rengotten, Yathak, and Black Lightless Nakai. It's from Nakai that frightful Sathagaga came. Excuse me. Reading these books will put your throat drier than this air. And then there was light. Probably this world seemed just as terrible to the beings when they first explored it in the primal age. You know, they were long here before the fabulous... Oh, there we go, sorry. And great worlds of unknown life down there. Blue Litten Kanai, red Litten Yups, and black lightless Nakai. It's from Nakai that frightful Sadaga came. And you know, the amorphous toad-like god creature mentioned in the Narcotic manuscripts and the Necronomicon and the Comorian myth cycle preserved by the Antiochian high priest Clarkish Tan. But we will talk all of this later on. It must be 4 or 5 o'clock by this time. Actually, it's 5:26. Funny. Better bring the stuff from your bag, take a bite, and then come back for a comfortable chat, maybe tomorrow or wherever you want to think that will be at. What you gonna do? Very slowly, I turned to begin to obey my host, fetching my ballast, extracting and depositing the desired article, and finally ascending to the room designated as mine. With the memory of that roadside call print fresh in my mind, Achilles' whispered paragraphs had affected me queerly, and the hints of familiarity with this unknown world of fungus life, forbidden Yugot, made my flesh creep more than I cared to own. I was tremendously sorry about Achilles' illness, but I had to confess that his worst whisperer had a hateful as well as pitiful quality. If only he wouldn't gloat so about Yugot and its black secrets. My room proved a very pleasant and well-furnished one, devoid alike of the musty odor and disturbing sense of vibration. And after leaving my ballast there, I descended again to greet Achille and take the lunch he had set out for me. The dining room was just beyond the study, and I saw that a kitchen all L extended still farther in the same direction. On the dining table, an ample array of sandwiches, cake, and cheese awaited me, and a thermos bottle beside a cup and saucer testified that hot coffee had not been forgotten. After a well-relished meal, I poured myself a liberal cup of coffee, but found that the culinary standard had suffered a lapse in this one detail. My first spoonful revealed a faintly unpleasant acrid taste, so that I did not take more. Throughout the lunch, I thought of Achilles sitting silently in the great chair in the darkened next room. Once I went in to beg him to share the repast, but he whispered that he could not eat nothing as yet. Later on, just before he slept, he would take some malted milk, and he thought that was all he was going to have that day. After lunch, I insisted on clearing the dishes away and washing them in the kitchen sink, incidentally emptying the coffee, which I had not been able to appreciate. Then returning to the darkened study, I drew up a chair near my host's corner and prepared for such conversation as he might feel inclined to conduct. The letters, pictures, and record were still on the large center table, but for the nonce we did not have to draw upon them. Excuse my silliness there. August Monday, beware. Before long, I forgot even the bizarre odor and curious suggestions of vibration. I have said that there were things in some of Achilles' letters, especially the second and most voluminous one, which I would not dare to quote or even form into words on paper. This hesitancy applies with still greater force to the things I heard whispered that evening in the darkened room among the lonely haunted hills. Of the extent of the cosmic horrors unfolded by that raucous voice I cannot even hint. He had known hideous things before, but what he had learned since making his pact with outside things was almost too much for sanity to bear. Even I, excuse me, even now I absolutely refuse to believe what he implied about the Constitution of ultimate infinity, the juxtaposition of dimensions, and the frightful position of our known cosmos of space and time in the unending chain of linked cosmos atoms which makes up the immediate supercosmos of curves, angles, and material and semi-material electronic organization. Never was a sane man more dangerously close to the arcana of basic entity. Never was an organic brain nearer to utter annihilation in the chaos that transcends form and force and symmetry. I learned whence Cthulhu first came, and why half the great temporary stars of history had flared forth. I guessed, from hints which the actually it made me my informant pause timidly. The secret behind the Magellanic clouds and globular nebulae, and the black truth belayed by the immemorial allegory of Tao. The nature of the dose was plainly revealed, and I was told the essence, though not the source, of the hounds of Tindalos. The legend of Yig, father of serpents, remained figurative no longer, and I started with loathing when told of the monstrous nuclear chaos beyond angled space which the Necronomicon had mercifully cloaked under the name of Azathoth. It was shocking to have the foulest nightmares of secret myth cleared up in concrete terms whose stark, morbid hatefulness exceeded the boldest sense of ancient and medieval mystics, and eluctably I was led to believe that the first whisperers of these accursed tales must have had discourse with Achilles' outer ones, and perhaps have visited outer cosmic realms as Achilles now proposed visiting them. I was told of the Black Stone and what it implied, and was glad that it had not reached me. My guesses about those hieroglyphics had been all too correct, and yet Achilles now seemed reconciled to the whole fiendish system he had stumbled upon, reconciled and eager to probe farther into the monstrous abyss. I wondered what beings he had talked with since his last letter to me, and whether many of them had been as human as that first emissary that I had mentioned. The tension the tension in my head grew insufferable, and I built up all sorts of wild theories about the queer, persistent odor and those insidious hints of vibration in the darkened room. Another drink of water. Oh, shoot, I might finish this one on Terrific Tricky Tuesday. Excuse me. Just, I'm gonna try my best here to finish this. And I built up all sorts of wild theories about the queer, persistent odor and those insidious hints of vibration in the darkened room. Night was falling now, but not quite, and as I recalled what Achilles had written me about those earlier nights, I shuddered to think there would be no moon. Nor did I like the way the farmhouse nestled in the lee of that colossal forested slope leading up the dark mountain's unvisited crest. With Achilles' permission, I lighted a small oil lamp, turned it low, and set it on a distant bookcase beside the ghostly bust of Milton. But afterward I was sorry I had done so, for it made my host strained, immobile face and listless hands look damnably abnormal and corpse-like. He seemed half incapable of motion, though I saw him nod stiffly once in a while. After what he had told, I could scarcely imagine what profounder secrets he was saving for the morrow, but at last it developed that his trip to Yuggoth and beyond, and my own possible participation in it, was to be the next day's topic. He must have been amused by the start of horror I gave it, hearing a cosmic voyage on my part proposed, for his head wabbled violently when I shewed my fear. Subsequently, he spoke very gently of how human beings might accomplish, and several times had accomplished, that seemingly impossible flight across the interstellar void. It seemed that complete human bodies did not indeed make the trip, but that the prodigious surgical, biological, chemical, and mechanical skill of the outer ones had found a way to convey human brains without their commitment or concomitant to physical structure. There was a harmless way to extract a brain and a way to keep the organic residue alive during its absence. The whisper in darkness. The bare, compact cerebral matter was then immersed in an occasionally replenished fluid with an ether-tight cylinder of a metal mind in Yuggoth, certain electrodes reaching through and connecting at will with elaborate instruments capable of duplicating three vital faculties of sight, hearing, and speech. For the winged fungus beings to carry the brain cylinders intact through space was an easy matter. Then, on every planet covered by their civilization, they would find plenty of adjustable faculty instruments capable of being connected with the encased brains, so that after a little fitting these and traveling intelligences could be given a full sensory and articulate life, albeit a bodiless and mechanical one, at each stage of their journey in through and beyond the space-time continuum. It was as simple as carrying a phonograph record about and playing it wherever a phonograph of the corresponding make exists. Of its success, there could be no question. Akili was not afraid, had it been not brilliantly accomplished again and again. For the first time, one of the inert, wasted hands raised itself and pointed stiffly to a high shelf on the farther side of the room. There, in a neat row, stood more than a dozen cylinders of metal I had never seen before, cylinders about a foot high and somewhat less in diameter. There, with three curious sockets set in an isosceles triangle over the front convex surface of each. One of them was linked at two of the sockets to a pair of singular-looking machines that stood in the background. Of their purport, I did not need to be told, and I shivered as with a view. Then I saw the hand point to a much nearer corner, which some intricate instruments with attached cords and plugs, several of them much like the two devices on the shield behind the cylinders, were huddled together. There are four kinds of instruments here, William Marth, whispered the voice. Four kinds, three faculties each, marks, makes 12 pieces in all. You see, there are four different sorts of beings presented in those cylinders up there. Three humans, six fungoid beings who can't navigate space corporally, two beings from Neptune. God, if you could see the body this type has on its own planet, and there's entities from the central caverns of an especially interesting dark star beyond the galaxy. Whoa. In the principal outposts inside Brown Hill, you'll now and then find more cylinders and machines. Cylinders of extra cosmic brains with different senses from any we know. Allies and explorers from the uttermost outside, and special machines for giving them impressions and expression in the several ways suited at once to them and to the comprehension of different types of listeners. Round Hill, like most of the beings, main outposts all through the various universes, is a very cosmopolitan place. Of course, only the more common types have been lent to me for experiment here. Take the three machines I point to and set them on the table. The tall one with the two glass lenses in front, then the box with the vacuum tubes and sounding board, and now the one with the metal disc on top. Now for the cylinder, one with the label B67 pasted on it. Just stand in with her chair to reach the self. Heavy? Never mind. Be sure the number B67. Don't bother that fresh, shiny cylinder joined to the two existing instruments. The one with my name on it, see it. B67 on the table near where you put the machines. And say that the dial switch on all three machines is jammed over to the extreme left. Now connect the cord of the lens machine with the upper socket on the cylinder. There, join the tube machine to the lower left-hand socket and the disc apparatus to the outer socket. Now move all the dial switches on the machines over to the extreme right. First the left one, the lens one, then the disc one, and then the tube one. That's right, I said it. I might as well tell you that this is a human being, just like any of us. I'll give you a taste of some of the others tomorrow. To this day, I do not know why I obeyed those whispers so slavishly, like a slave. Whether I thought Akili was mad or sane. After what had gone before, I ought to have been prepared for anything, but this mechanical mummery seems so like the typical vagaries of crazed inventors and scientists that it struck a chord of doubt, which even the preceding discourse had not excited. What the whisper implied was beyond all human belief, yet there were not the other things still farther beyond and less preposterous only because of their remoteness from tangible concrete proof. As my mind reeled amidst this chaos, I became conscious of a mixed grating and whirring from all three of the machines lately linked to the cylinder, a grating and whirring which soon subsided into a virtual noiselessness. What was about to happen? Was I to hear a voice? And if so, what proof would I have that it was not some cleverly concocted radio device talked into by a concealed but closely watching speaker? Even now I am unwilling to say where just what I heard, or what just the phenomenon really took place before me, but something certainly seemed to take place. To be brief and plain, the machine with the tubes and sound box began to speak, and with a point and intelligence which left no doubt that the speaker was actually present and observing us. Oh, crap. The voice was loud, metallic, lifeless, and plainly mechanical in every detail of its production. It was incapable of infection or expressiveness, but scraped and rattled on with a deadly precision and deliberation. Mr. Wilmot, it said, I hope I do not startle you. I'm a human being like yourself, and my body is now resting safely under proper vitalizing treatment inside Round Hill. Is that about a mile and a half east of here? Yes, it is. I myself am here with you. My brain is in that cylinder, and I see, hear, and speak through these electronic vibrators. In a week, I am going across the void as I have been many times before, and I expect to have the pleasure of Mr. Keeley's company. I wish I might have yours as well, for I know you by sight and reputation, and have kept close track of your correspondence with our friend. I am, of course, one of the men who become allied with outside beings visiting our planet. I met them first in the Himalayas, and have helped them in various ways. In return, they have given me experiences such as few men have ever had. Do you realize what it means when I say I've been on 37 different celestial bodies, planets, dark stars, endless definable objects, including 8 outside our galaxy and 2 outside the curved cosmos of space and time? All this has not harmed me in the least. My brain has been removed from my body by fission, so adroit that it would be crude to call the operation surgery. The visiting beings have methods which make these extractions easy and almost normal, and one's body never ages when the brain is out of it. The brain, I may add, is virtually immortal with its mechanical faculties and a limited nourishment supplied by occasional changes of pres- uh, the preserving fluid. Excuse my dry mouth. Altogether, I hope most heartily that you will decide to come with me, Mr. Ackley, and me. The visitors are eager to know men of knowledge like yourself, and to shew them the great abysses that most of us have had to dream about in fanciful ignorance. It may seem strange at first to meet them, but I know you will be above minding that. I think Mr. Noyes will go along too, the man who doubtless brought you up here in his car. He's been one of us for years. I suppose you recognize his voice as one of those on the record Mr. Keeley sent you. At my violent start, the speaker paused a moment before concluding. So, Mr. Wilmar, I will leave the matter to you, merely adding that a man with your life of strangeness and folklore never could miss such a chance as this. There is nothing to fear. All transitions are painless, and there is much to enjoy in a wholly mechanized state of a sensation. When the electrodes are disconnected, one merely drops off into a sleep of especially vivid and fantastic dreams. And now, if you don't mind, we might adjourn our session till tomorrow. Good night. Just turn all the switches back to the left. Never mind the exact order, though you might let the lens machine be last. Good night, Mr. Akili. Treat our guests well. Ready now with those switches? That was all. I obeyed mechanically and shut off all 3 switches, though dazed with doubt of everything that had occurred. My head was still reeling as I heard Achilles' whispering voice telling me that I might leave all the apparatus on the table just as it was. He did not essay any comment on what had happened, and indeed no comment could have conveyed much to my burdened faculties. I heard him telling me I could take the lamp to use in my room, but deduced that he wished to reserve alone in the dark. It was surely time he rested, for his discourse of the afternoon and evening had been such as to exhaust even a vigorous man. Still dazed, I bade my host good night and went upstairs with the lamp. Though I had an excellent pocket flashlight with me, I was glad to be out of that downstairs study with the queer odor and vague suggestions of vibration, yet could not of course escape a hideous sense of dread and peril and cosmic abnormality as I thought of the place I was in and the forces I was meeting, the wild, lonely region, the black, mysteriously forested slope towering so close behind the house, the footprints in the road, the sick, motionless whisper in the dark, the hellish cylinders and machines, and above all the invitations to strange surgery and stranger voyagings. These things also knew, and in such sudden succession rushed in on me with a cumulative force which sapped my will, and almost undermined my physical strength. To discover that my guide was the human celebrant in that monstrous bygone Sabbat ritual on the phonograph record was a particular shock, though I had previously sensed a dim, repellent familiarity in his voice. Another special shock came from my own attitude toward my host whenever I paused to analyze it. For much as I had instinctively liked Achille as revealed in his correspondence, I now found that he filled with me a distinct repulsion. His illness ought to have excited my pity, and when I finish this chapter, I will finish the rest of this particular story from H.P. Lovecraft, The Whisper in Darkness, on Terrific Tricky Tuesday. But instead it gave me a kind of shudder. He was so rigid and inert and corpse-like, and that incessant whispering was so hateful and unhuman. It occurred to me that this whispering was different than anything else of the kind I had ever heard, that despite the curious motionlessness of the speaker's mustache-screened lips, it had a latent strength and carrying power remarkable for the wheezings of an asthmatic. I had been able to understand the speaker when wholly across the room, and once or twice it had seemed to me that the faint but penetrant sounds represented not so much weakness as deliberate repression. For what reason I could not guess. From the first I had felt a disturbing quality in their timbre. Now when I tried to weigh the matter, I thought I could trace this impression to a kind of subconscious familiarity like that which had made Noy's voice so hazily ominous. But when or where I had encountered the thing it hinted at was more than I could tell. One thing was certain. I would not spend another night here. My scientific zeal had vanished amidst fear and loathing, and I felt nothing now but a wish to escape from this set of morbidity that it had the net and unnatural revelation on me. I knew enough now. It must indeed be true that cosmic linkages do exist, but such things are surely not meant for normal human beings to meddle with. Blasphemous influences seemed to surround me and press chokingly upon my senses. Sleep, I decided, would be out of the question, so I merely extinguished the lamp and threw myself on the bed, fully dressed. Now that it was absurd, but I kept ready for some unknown emergency, gripping in my right hand the revolver I had brought along and holding the pocket flashlight in my left. Not a sound came from below, and I could imagine how my host was sitting there with cat over a stiffness in the dark. Somewhere I heard a clock ticking, and was vaguely grateful for the normality of the sound. It reminded me, though, of another thing about the region which disturbed me, the total absence of animal life. There were certainly no farm beasts about, and now I realized that even the accustomed night noises of wild living things were absent, except for the sinister trickle of distant, unseen waters. That stillness was anomalous, interplanetary, and I wondered what star-spawned, intangible blight could be hanging over the region. And I recalled from old legends that dogs and other beasts had always hated the outer ones and thought of what those tracks in the road might mean. Excuse me, Basic Log of Gratitude video 4. This is also conjoined with the continuation of Basic Log of Gratitude Volume 3 and the H.P. Lovecraft story, The Whisper in Darkness. Finishing up on this tomorrow, I will. Terrific Tricky Tuesday. JakeJohnstone19.com. Creativity with a passion for a purpose. To entertain, to motivate, to inspire. Have a terrific Tricky Tuesday tomorrow.